Labrīt visiem. Good morning to everyone. Liels prieks, ka mēs atkal tiekamies ikgadējā universitātes konferencē 79. Un tā jau tradicionāli mūsu plānošana sekcija universitātes kopējā ikgadējās konferences sakarā. Mēs vairāk kā 15 gadus veidojam šīs plānošanas sekcijas sēdes un alaži interesanti bijušas diskusiju dēļ. Šogad mums bija iecerē mēģināt uzlūkoties nākotnē. Parasti plānošana vai bieži, teiksim, tā analītiskā plānošana ir saistīta ar notikumiem, kas bijuši pirms šodienas, un šodien mēs fiksējam lietas. Mājoklis bija tas un nākotnes mājoklis bija tas galvenais fokus, bet tas paplašinājās ar jūsu tādiem kā ieguldījumiem. Un būtībā mēs runājam par tādu papildus dimensiju. Tā ir pilsētas, pamatā pilsētas dzīves telpa, dzīves kvalitāte, cilvēka būšana pilsētā. Mums divās daļās šodien. Pirmā daļa ir vairāk fokusēta tiešām uz mājokli, otra varbūt ir plašāka. Un mums divi arī vadītāji. Sandris Mūriņš, sociologs, ekonomists, plānotājs. Daudz no mums ir strādājuši kopā ar viņu, un Gunta Lukstiņa, man tuvāk kolēģi universitātē, arī strādājot ar Telpiskās plānošanas studijām. Hello to everyone. It's really honor to meet you here and to announcing this planning section of 79th University conference, scientific conference. We have this special planning development section for more than 15 years. It's like tradition. And in this year, our ambition was to ask you to think and make some input for looking to future housing and housing in general, taking account of considering what should happen in the next tens of years, because usually in planning and recession planning, we are doing too much on the processes which has been happening in last years or tens of years, and just fixing what is the situation at the moment. No contemporary issues and problems, but it's an ambition to think about the really future. Today we have two panels of inputs from your side, and the first is more focused on housing, but the second is mostly about human being in the urban environment or human urban environment and being there. We have two panels and two chairs. Sandris Mūriņš is a very nice colleague of mine, economist, sociologist, and a planner. We have been working on planning projects for years, and my close university colleague Gunta Lukstiņa. So I would give floor to Sandris Mūriņš to start the first panel.
Thank you very much, Petris. So it's my big pleasure to be there. So in the first section will be about lifestyle and future of housing. So we will have 6 presenters. For each, we have 20 minutes, including discussion. And afterwards, we will have a short panel discussion. So some rules of the game. So the first rule of the game for listeners is like that if you have some questions, please write them in the chat, or wait until the presenter will finish his or her presentation, and then just use emoticon raise a hand like that, and so then I know to whom to give a word. So it's two shortly again. So it's two opportunities, right? Whether in the chat or if you want to say something, then just use emoticon and raise a hand. This is for audience. For presenters, I would like that you would like to stick to the time. So we have 20 minutes for each of you, and I will use emoticon like love or hurt emoticon when you will have 5 minutes left. So, but please give some time for questions as well. So I would encourage you to plan your presentation and to speak around from 50 to 80 minutes. And now I would like to give the word to our first presenter, to Frank Eckardt.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conference and to allow me to present my work to you. And I hope you can see my screen now. I'm not sure you can.
Yes, we can see, but you need to put it on a full screen mode.
Like this?
Yes, and it's post-Corona city, what we see.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Good. Yeah, thank you so much again. And of course, following the question that Petrus was just bringing forward about talking about the future and this uncertainty, I think that we are all facing is something on the one hand side very, very important. On the other hand, the most difficult thing to do. And when I was thinking about what I can present to you, and then I looked around that everybody talked about it, either they talked about crisis or they said, no, it's not a crisis, it's just something, interruption, it will go over. Then I was kind of reminded that this debate, whether we have a crisis or not, is something that, as long as I can remember, is going on since decades. And the subjects are changing. But the question is whether it's really a crisis or it's just an interruption, a malfunctioning of something, and then we will go back to normality. Is something that I cannot answer here, but I think we are all aware that if we talk about crisis, then we are definitely not only talking about the corona crisis that we are in now, but also about the crisis, the ecological crisis with the climate change, the social crisis of segregation in many cities. And of course, I would also think that we are in a, what Colin Crouch, the English political scientist, called post-democracy kind of crisis of our political system. So yes, I think with this kind of a wider setting of what the crisis all entails, it is important to see how are the debates now here, and I can only speak for Germany, and to some extent I looked around in the other European countries, how they're dealing with this with regards to housing and urban planning. And what we can see is that most of the planning and policy reactions in this field of planning are more or less focusing on one of the 4 fields that are mentioned here. So protecting your health in the first case, prioritizing equity in recovering efforts, fund emergency and housing support, rent and eviction support systems, and housing policy, strengthening housing policy in general. So I think this is a wide scale of interventions and programs. And in some countries, it's more this one, and in others, it's more that one. For example, Germany had a cancel of eviction program but they stopped it for whatever reason. I don't understand. We were just before the big evictions will come. The United States are much better in this. Maybe the problem is bigger there. Emerging funding of emerging housing has not happened in Germany. In other countries it did. But in general, I think this is a kind of overview what happens at the moment in most countries, and I can speak, of course, for Letland, and that's what we need maybe to discuss. But when I look at how is the discussion in Germany among the urban planners, because all of these policies are more on the national policy level, on people who are actually no planners at all, they are not specialists at all. But when we look at what are the planners doing, I must admit that in Germany the discussion is quite little. And what has been achieved is this memorandum here of the so-called post-corona city. It's a memorandum of some agencies, institutions dealing with urban planning. So, for example, it's the German Institute for Spatial Research and Planning, which is an official body actually of the German government, who joined this memorandum. So these are the ideas of what the post-corona city looks like, or should look like, or where we should plan for. And it looks like a list what you send to Santa Claus, what you all wish for. And so I'm not going to read all of this, because these are the key points that we are always confronted with since many years. So just to give you an example, housing policy, cooperation with changing information and needs. Yes, you cannot make it more general and less specific. So I think this is not really helpful, but that's the state of debate we are in. That's where we are. So don't expect much from this scene of urban planners. I must admit, it's very, very teethless, I would say. But nevertheless, it has been leading to a first program supported by the Federal Ministry of the Interior, Built and Home Affairs, which is the national ministry in Germany responsible for urban planning. I have to inform you or give you the information that in Germany, the most important level of urban planning is the region, or what we call the Land. So the local state, the regional state. It's not the national state. The national state just gives a frame and can give some incentives from how you should do it. But in fact, it's the state, the local state. We have 16 local states. These are the bodies where really the urban planning policy is made, and the cities are joining in that. So this is just, the national government just gives incentives of what can be done. So it tries to show models of good urban planning. So, and they started this program of the post-corona city, so exemplary solutions, that's what they call. And they selected among more than 200 applications. They elected also a project which is related to my chair, to the University of Weimar. So we are well lucky that we are selected to give that kind of model to what the post-corona city could look like. I'm just giving you a rough overview of what kind of projects have been selected. Topic 1, solidarity in the neighborhood and business in the neighborhood. So you can see here different cities have been chosen, and one of the 6 in this basket of project is the Weimar Real Laboratory and Center for Participatory Culture in an old fire station. And I'm going to give you some more details on this, but you can see there are different projects which I looked at it. I cannot give you so much details, but they are trying to really with this project trying to get a diversity of possible solutions on a small scale. Another basket was public space, mobility, and urban structures. Here another 6 projects were selected, and then in the third basket only 2 projects were selected by with projects in Frankfurt and Berlin. So we are quite lucky, and we feel privileged to have this project, which is located here in the city of Weimar. Weimar is a small city, only 60,000 inhabitants. It has a old city center, and within this old city center, you have here this this red bottom. This is an old firework housing area, and here this is really right in the city center. And the city center in the last 20-30 years, after German reunification, has become very hip, and it's the prices, the rents are going up very much. For example, I had an apartment in the city center which costed only 200 euros. Now it's 800, so it's 4 times the price. I left and it's empty. It's gone immediately. The market is very hot. So what happens is we are afraid that the inner city will totally gentrify, will be left over for the middle and upper class, and to the fringes the poor people will move. So this is the old fireworks environment as it looked like in the good old time, when you see when it was still socialist. Sorry, it's ironic, good old time, please. This was first a car producing industry area, and then it was the owner of the car in this enterprise was giving it to the city as a gift, and said, make something for the best of all people. And the city in the 1920s decided to make it firework, and in the 1950s, 60s, the firework was outdated, and it was left over to the weather. We can say nothing happened with that. It was empty, and now these are the pictures on the right, which are showing you the situation now. It's rotting, so it's really a waste of a very nice place and a very central place in the city. Okay, so what are the planning objectives here? What will be achieved by this initiative of the old fireworks? The planning are for making it with a green courtyard, giving it a public hall and a cafe, incubating new initiatives in the cultural, media, art sector. The host tower should be kept as a landmark, as an architectural landmark. There shall be on-site workplaces, a kindergarten for the neighborhood, which there is no kindergarten at the moment. And that the general idea, make it a living space for all generations. So it's something that is a kind of trying to make it an affordable, need-based rental apartment with a cooperative architecture and in cooperation with the so-called Lebenshilfe, that is something for handicapped people. And in the future, it is predicted, or it is planned, to have 70 people living there. So this is the plan, how we want that to be looking like. You can see it here. We want to have a cafe, a new housing area, old housing estates shall be renovated, some places to work and live, and some office spaces. So that's how it is intended to be. At least that's our plan. And the architects have been visualizing it, and if the dreams come true, then this is how we imagine it to be in the future. So I think this is all very much a nice idea and a good idea. But what it is, maybe why it has been selected, it is not something that has been produced by an architectural office or was a planning directive from the city hall. Right on the contrary, it has been a product of a participatory approach. And this participatory approach is quite innovative, as it tries to spread financial responsibility not only among those people who are going to live there, which would be impossible because we intend to have people without much financial resources to come, but to be sponsored by a huge community all around Germany, and even some supporters from Europe. So it's kind of crowdsourcing, it's kind of cooperative, associative financing, and still we miss another 500,000 euros. So that's still not enough to buy the whole area and to set this plan into practice. The problem is in Germany that if a city has a territory like this, it is obligatory in the first place to sell it to the one who has the most money. So if somebody offers, let's say, 10 million euros for this place, and we have only 2 million, then the city must sell it to the one who's offering 10 millions. But there's one exception, which is called the concept process procedure. The city can start a concept process procedure when it has good reasons to say there are overarching social and social objectives which needs to be addressed. And what we did actually, basically my co-worker Anton did most of the last 5 to 10 years, is to make this argument, to say we are in a city overheated, and it is very much in need of socially available rental spaces. So please give it to an initiative which will secure that poor people can live there, and that people like the Handicapped Association and the young families are going to move in. If you sell it to an international investor, then it will be just sold further and further for the highest prices, and it is gone. So the innovative part of this process is to say, no, we make it a rental space for every budget, and we are creating it by ourselves. So this process of participation is a very complicated and time-consuming process. Happily, we could say we are in the city of Weimar with the Bauhaus University, and a lot of our students studying architecture or planning, they think that is a case for them to exercise how it could be differently done. So that's why this is much based by like my co-worker Anton and many students who live there. But of course, it is difficult as students stay for 3-4 years, and we have never assumed that this process will take so long. It's still not finished and still not successfully, but with the support of the national government now, we have a strong say to say to the local government, look, this is really something you should support. So this is a picture undertaken saying we are the firework, the old firework team. And as you can see, it's a huge group. It has a lot of local support, but it has even more support outside Weimar. And as I said before, this is a picture, I don't know, I think it's already 2 years ago. I guess maybe 10 or more people already have left again. So that's one of the difficulties of this, this process. And because it is so difficult to keep this people inside the participation process, we are thinking about a new way of organizing it. And that means that we are trying to connect to what is called a syndicate of rental houses. This syndicate of rental houses is a complex organization. I cannot explain this in detail, but it's a national organization which supports this kind of initiatives, and it's completely autonomous. And the main goal is to say, we take houses from the housing market, and if somebody moves out of the house, he doesn't sell it to somebody else, but it remains in the national syndicate. And we are securing, we are safeguarding that then a new initiative will go in. So that's trying to make it sustainable. And this syndicate exists already since 20 years. It's growing very strongly. In some cities in Germany, it's growing, it's very strong. Like in Leipzig, we have 70 houses which are part of the syndicate. In other places, it's less. This one is the first in Weimar, in our region. So it is an established organization, although if you look at the whole scale of housing market in Germany, it's of course small. So let me finish my presentation with trying to critically discuss what I've presented to you. As I said, it's still an unsecure financial situation. Will it be solvable? In the morning, I'm optimistic. In the evening, I'm less. Because when we see, okay, how much we still need and what's still required, then the time is running against us. The city is supposed to handle it over as soon as possible, because there are costs that the city covers now, because it is not the maintenance costs, which is because it's not sold to anybody. Then the second point is, it is a long-lasting and time-consuming process. So while maybe at the end people poor people might benefit from it, the process itself cannot be realized by themselves. So we have kind of situation where some people do something for somebody else, and that is always a tricky thing, because you think it should be like this. But then when the real renters will come in, they want to have it differently. So the community is unstable. We're trying to solve that within the organizational scheme, which I propose to you. But then this is a small scheme, and it also has some pro and cons. So can we learn from this example, as the national government hopes that this is an example for solving problems? I think yes, in the sense that we are groundbreaking by developing new juridical and formal support schemes for a different way of planning housing, and for a housing which is an answer to at least some of the crises that I started to talk about. It's trying to answer the question on how can we solve the social crisis of segregation in our cities? How can we ecologically sustainable build something for many people, etc. So is it something on the corona crisis? I don't know. Actually, I really don't know. It is in any case a social learning process for everybody who is involved and for the community itself. When we started this, the city of Weimar said to us, that's completely strange. What do you want? This is, nobody done this. We don't, like as if we are talking completely nonsense. So now the city says, that's great. If we could support you, we would do that. And but city of Weimar is poor. In fact, it doesn't have so much resources, so they can't. All those students who are running through this process, they learned a lot, and they go somewhere else, and hopefully some of them at least will bring their knowledge, their experience in for other initiatives to follow somewhere else. So I hope that this was an interesting example from our side, how we try to learn from this crisis that we have for housing and planning. I'm sure it is not perfect, but I thank you very much for listening to me. I would be very delighted if we could exchange a little bit on your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have a question, right, in chat. Can you address your question?
I can't see oh, here. Sorry, I didn't see the. Okay. Our participatory process long partly because of the lack of social capacity. As people, I'm just reading the question by Joanna Story here. As people participate in this process, it should speed up. It sets a pattern for the future too, helps to find more methods that work, especially if it is an adaptive framework. Well, we have in Germany, we have process of participation which are regulated by the laws, and there's a strict procedure how things needs to be included. However, these processes do not really work very well. They are often just informing the people, and when there are some kind of informative actions, then the people are many people are not participating, and especially those who are most concerned are not participating. That is to say, the old, the poor, the foreigners, they are not part of participatory planning processes. So, and it's kind of very formal thing. So what we try here is to make, if you like, to make it a living thing, to let's live together, make actions together, make different activities together, so that you build up a kind of community, and where everybody can easily bring in his or her view on the place and what she or he wants. And that is time consuming. It's easy to announce, to say, let's meet tomorrow and let's discuss what we were going to plan here. Yes, but the experience shows from really 20, 30 years of participatory planning in Germany, who will come and who will not come. And those who are not coming are the vast majority. And there is really a lack of support from the people to join that, because it's assumed to be very formal, and they have the feeling whatever I say, it will not be heard anyway. So yes, speeding it up would be good, but the speed we have in the formal participatory process is really counteracting on what we want to achieve at the end. So that's why we try to innovate that with setting up a center for participatory culture, saying participation starts with empowering people to participate. We first have to give trust and build up trust with the people before they can engage. They will not come to you engage with a stranger. Why should they? They have other things to do, and it's so unlikely that they will profit from it. So no, we don't go there. But if you start with them saying, look, you need a place for your children to stay. Here we have an empty space. Let's make something together. Let's set it up, and then we're creating places for you to live. And by this, you're slowly adapting yourself to the place, to the other people which you don't know. Then you start to think, well, that could be a place for me to live here. And that's the basic idea behind what we do.
Frank, we have one more question. Can you just, but very quickly, because we are running out of time.
Sorry. Yes.
So we have a question from Yekaterina. Can you address that as well?
Yeah, I think the problems I just already mentioned, that it's about trust, it's about being heard, having the capacity to talk, to be knowledgeable about what is planning, what can be done. So that these are, I think, the most important problems.
So thank you very much, Frank, for your amazing presentation. And now I would give a word to Tālis Tisenkopfs.
Thank you, Sandris. Thank you for inviting. I will share my screen. Yeah, like this. My paper, so spotlight. my paper called Inclusive Health and Wellbeing in Cities. It refers to an ongoing project called Inhabit, funded by the EU under Horizon 2020. And we are 3 participants from Riga in this project, us Baltic Studies Center, Kalnciema Quarter, and Riga Planning Region. I will a little tell about the basis of the project and how it evolves, and also reflect on theoretical frameworks and conclude with some reflection on realities and idealism of place shaping. This is the place, Āgenskalns market in Riga, which under the project Inhabit is to be developed into a multifunctional creative food hub. The place is historical, it's close to center, the Latvians know, but it's also marked on a neighborhood map, and Riga city in its development relies increasingly on the neighborhood approaches and involvement. In terms of wider policy context, this is one of the sister projects in EU funding scheme. For example, the other project connecting nature based on nature-based solutions for city development. An interesting project on edible cities, but the Inhabit, the project I'm telling, stands for inclusive health and well-being in peripheral, small and medium-sized cities, reflecting the new EU integrated approach to human-centered cities with people in the center, with citizens as policy makers. There are a few other cities involved, so to speak, peripheral in Europe, medium-sized cities, Cordoba in Spain, putting an emphasis on green infrastructure, Riga on food and market, Lucca in Italy on human-animal bonds, interestingly, looking at this dimension of city development, and Nitra in Slovakia, putting stakes on culture and arts, role and place in cities. And we deploy several key concepts in this project, like co-creation for urban design, multi-stakeholder engagement, what Frank referred to already. The innovation is conceived broadly as social, nature-based, cultural, and also digital innovation. And we look for systemic solutions by reconnecting people, policies, nature, societies, and other components of urban development. What we are going to do in Āgenskalns, the goal is to promote healthy and inclusive communities in the neighborhood by developing Āgenskalns market into an open and creative food hub. And we have spotted 4 main directions of work: sport and playground, infrastructure, community, kitchen, eco-island and waste reduction site, and online food purchasing system, with many different activities planned, like new green zones, interactive events, educational courses, for example, for urban gardeners, also some sophisticated behavioral games to guide sustainable consumption, novel food chain arrangements, and more. These are to be specified in so-called Riga in Hub. Riga in Hub. You see in the next slide what is in Hub. The project is called Inhabit in abbreviation, but we understand that there should be a kind of driving structure in Hub. We call it in Hub, which would be defined as community innovation incubator based on people participation, decision making, and profiling and implementing the actions. I must say that there are two kind of different logics. One logic is what happens in the place itself. The place, perhaps you have heard that Kalnciema quarter, which owns and manages the famous Kalnciema Tirdziņš, has taken over from the city council long-term lease of this old historical building. They invest a lot in private. They have done already developments in online marketing, and they have attracted also some city-funded projects to reconstruct the adjacent square. And recently they acquired also Erasmus Plus to establish a community theater on the premises, on site. So there are other projects in the pipeline. They are looking also for energy efficiency project, for logistical center, a project aimed at children tourism into the place. So this is one logic what the investor is doing, the Kalnciema quarter, investing money and etc. And now we came in together with them, but also us as researchers and the Riga planning region as public authority with our so-called Inhabit project. The project started last year, 2020. It's in the very inception phase. It will last for 5 years, but we have been in the process now of formation of InHub, of this basic core team structure. And we have been already actively communicating the InHub on Facebook page, but also announcing an open call for citizens to come and join. You see on the right side in Latvian, aicinām pieteikties projekta padomē, to apply for membership in project advisory board. So this is the process. The activities so far, the thing is to establish a kind of driving structure to promote and start development. And we, the 3 contractual partners in the Horizon project, we are so-called core team. We meet bi-weekly online. We plan activities. We performed the stakeholder mapping with the involvement of people from Ārgenskalns neighborhood and beyond. We have discussed the InHub structure. We have held stakeholder workshop to map their expectations and interests in the place development. And we also have nominated so-called community activator who will be responsible for managing the participatory process. And we recently launched an open call for user advisory board. It was published in social media of various organizations. And at the moment we have selected 9 members from the public to become a consultant body for the project, but not only to be part of that. And we see that on the right hand that there is a quite balanced representation of so-called PPP structure, which is people, public, private partnerships. We have people in the seminar workshop, but also in the advisory board from the city council, quite a good NGO, community representation, people from SMEs and local businesses in the neighborhood area, but also some students are involved and research organizations. Moving further, so this slide suggests how it's important to compose a structure behind participatory process. The core team, us, the Kalnciema Quarter, Baltic Studies Center, Riga Planning Region, and then the advisory board. And we are quite happy that applications came in, and in fact, we didn't refuse actually much. We allowed people who applied to come in, and we have representation of Green Freedom, Zaļā brīvība, the City Council, LGBT organization Mozaika is represented, a Permaculture Association, people from Ārgenskalna Apkaimes biedrība, Neighborhood Association, also ethnic minority group SME, and an architect. And when discussing with community members in an online workshop. We played with these Miro games and murals, etc. They certainly think that there are groups in the community to benefit from the Inhabit project, like young people, students, families with children, and more. But also we are worried not to leave groups potentially out. And there are always the risk that someone is in, but someone is left out. So the next steps in Riga Inhab activity will be the advisory board meetings. Our first meeting will be held on 31st of March. We'll start broader public consultation. And after that, we will develop so-called visionary and integrated solution plan, because the project has certain amount of subcontracting money for hard and soft investments, but towards what purposes, that should be decided by the advisory board with the involvement and suggestions of community. So, and after that, we will co-design and implement those hard and soft actions and do the continuous monitoring what's happening and how we can improve. And now I come to a theoretical reflection. What does it mean? How to understand the project itself is not a research project. It is indeed an action managed by agency for small, medium-sized enterprises. We are not obliged to do research, maybe at all, except maybe some light monitoring and assessment, but we are researchers and we want to reflect what is happening. And we will use perhaps the framework of relational space. For example, the absolute space, we know the place. It is composed of physical boundaries and artifacts. This is the place, like Frank suggested, an old fire brigade building in Weimar. Here in Riga, the old brick building. This is an absolute space, and it is strong in Agenskalns. But we're also looking into relative space dimension, which is composed of institutional divides and cooperation. Our places are often divided by external powers, by external agents, how they look upon our places. So it's important to enable cooperation to bridge those divides. And even more so, the relational space, which is composed of network ties. And we feel that in Agenskalns' case, there is a strong networking with many organizations, and they build strongly on Kalnciema quarter, Kalnciema Tirgus experience. And we also see that smart development has a good potential to involve. We understand smart development as identifying and supporting smart growth activities. And here there are like new waste collectives, like community kitchen to be established, like promotion of sustainable diets through the activities, etc. And we will work on this spatial concepts in relation to network governance concept, how these different concepts of spaces could be deployed in city development by using network approach, not a classical divide and rule hierarchical, but network distributed governance approach. And probably one more framework to reflect is digitalization. It's a fashionable word. You see the picture Market Hopper. It, by the way, is a global site for farmer market, but it was developed by Kalnciema Quarter in the previous EU project. And in this InHub project, perhaps we will employ people counting sensors, behavioral games, mobile experience sampling, whatever does it mean, and maybe other digital tools with anticipated impact on digital marketing, digital socialization, digital governance. Those Zoom workshops with stakeholders, for me, find form for digital governance. So, but the thing is that digital technologies don't achieve the desirable impact alone. They should be combined with social solutions, with people engagement. Only then they convert into so-called digital game changers and achieve impact. And one more possibility to reflect: every project strives for impact. This project strives for inclusion, for well-being, for broader impact on the community. And at the moment we are discussing where to look for our impact. The project is not terribly big in monetary terms and capacity. What can we impact at all with relatively small projects? And then this recent publication by ESPON on territorial quality of life suggests that small projects perhaps better concentrate on so-called enablers pillar in quality of life, like enhancing public spaces, meeting places, enhancing social capital of the community, rather than strive for hard outcomes like, for me, for example, I don't know, improved housing, you know, affordability. We cannot claim too much, but we have to be smart with our targeted impacts. And perhaps the last comment I want to reflect on theoretical possibilities, it's radical inclusion. The radical inclusion concept, which probably is a rather novel concept, full spectrum of diversity, presuming overcomes, so-called overcomes of prejudices, biases, etc. And we also want to involve many people, and how to involve, for example, seniors. We already encounter difficulty. Seniors are out maybe of online communication. They are more difficult to reach in COVID times. How to include economically vulnerable, lonely parents, people out of jobs. The same with accessibility groups, specific groups, LGBTQI, etc. debate. But we'll find out how to. It is important to concern the full spectrum, at least to concern, possibly to involve. And finally, 2 slides to conclude on the concepts, how the place development looks for the moment. There is a place, it is an absolute place, it is a relative, relational place, it is in place in Riga, it is a famous Āgenskalns market. And then comes us, the core team, the 3 project promoters, and the advisory board and wider people, public-private partnership to be enacted in the process. And then we build a more relational space, a more capacity to develop for that space. And then we will fund and implement some hard and soft solutions. For example, hard solution would be buying something for community kitchen, and soft solution, what will happen on community kitchen, how that will be connected to new waste recycling site on the market premises. And we look at this from a network governance perspective, which is beyond classical institutional governance, which is new multilateral process of collaboration, collaborative decision-making, even self-governance, commitment of resources. And by that we probably create so-called new locality. What is new locality? The same place, but transformed into new locality, into a creative, new multifunctional place. And new locality by definition is defined as new interdependencies, where local and global comes together, rural, urban, peri-urban, where different groups come together. It's interesting, the concept of new locality, and thereby the place becomes as if augmented, enlarged, enhanced interdependencies with hopefully well-being effects on the neighborhood and wider city. And finally, to conclude, much of vision, much of idealism, that it somehow coincides with recent development in EU urban policy agenda, where visionary, just and green and productive cities are put forefront. The social justice becomes something very important, the social justice, which refers to this radical inclusion. And of course, there are challenges as well, how to retain identity, how to increase functions, how to finance, and also how to avoid gentrification. I think the consumer market also might face these difficult decisions, how to avoid that only affluent people can go shopping there after good things happen. And I would end that building this in-hub or people, public-private partnership structure indeed requires time, it requires listening to the community needs, but it requires also facilitation and good organization. And I think since the process is open and just at the start, LU students are invited to become a part of the Riga in-hub. So thank you.
Thank you, Tālis. So, we have two information in comments. So first of all, can you share the link of the project and post it into comment section? And second, we have a question for you from Ekaterina. Can you address that shortly?
Question. Thank you, Tālis. For presentation, I assume that the project will have much more long-lasting impact than the project will last. Do you have any plans, methods, possibilities to all monitor the long-term impact? Yes, we have a dedicated work package on monitoring, and they are collecting indicators for the start. And then we have chosen also Čiekurkalna neighborhood as a kind of control, because in Agenskalns activities will take place in Čiekurkalns, possibly not that specific. And after a while, we can compare the differences. But I think that there are kind of cautious. One kind of monitoring is self-monitoring. It is very important that people who take part monitor themselves and make a record of activities, of their personal participation, investment, and change. And then what are the impact on the ordinary citizen from the next door in Agenskalns? So there are pros and cons in these evaluations.
So thank you very much for your presentation, Tālis. Can you just post a link here in comment section? Now I will give the floor to Sandra Treja and Alice Korolyova.
Thank you. Good morning, dear friends, dear colleagues. We are happy to collaborate with University of Latvia and would like to share our presentation, Collaborative Housing, Potential of Collaboration in Riga. With this presentation, we reacted to Gunta's ask to think on housing future. So since 2000s, many European countries have seen the re-emergence of a range of collective, self-organized and participatory forms on housing provision. Over the last decade, grassroots activities and international exchange in this field have increased, and the number of research and publications is rapidly growing. And whatever we went for study trips or for conferences, the local experts reported about co-housing and other initiatives in their cities as a growing process. So, and we are interested why locally in Riga, this phenomena is still in latent phase. The aim of this report is to study the potential of the collaborative housing concept in Latvia with a focus on Riga. As a background to this situation is the fact that housing in Europe is currently undergoing a period of crisis, characterized mainly by a lack of affordability. In 2017, the price of housing in European Union increased by 4.5%. The growth has been faster than household incomes. The other point relates to social housing system. In the last decades, the allocation of social housing is increasingly focused on the poorest people, to the detriment of low middle income household that in past decades after Second World War also beneficiaries of this type of subsidies. On the one hand, middle income households do not qualify for social housing or for any support for housing. And on the other, they can't access housing in the free market. And while the idea of collective self-organization in housing has a long tradition, the recent wave of housing initiatives in Europe features new aspects and aims to address pressing issues in today's society, such as social inclusion and cohesion, such as affordability, and as well higher environmental sustainability standards. About term, collaborative housing has been adopted by many researchers and practitioners over the last decades as an umbrella term to encompass the wide variety of these forms of housing can take. In general terms, collaborative housing is characterized by high level of involvement of residents in conception, development, and management of the project, as well as by establishment of relationship of reciprocity, mutual aid, and solidarity within the community. Collaborative housing today can be understood as part of the co-production paradigm as well. There are different models of collaboration, such as cooperatives of inhabitants, collective self-help housing initiatives, co-housing, and others. What is common in these models? These groups share certain values and motivation regarding their way of life, which guides the project from the beginning, shaping a common vision of their housing project. Since the origin of the first cooperative and community housing models more than a century ago, the aspiration to a life in community has been a main motivation in these projects.
Now we would like to show some examples of collaborative housing abroad. One of them is the Nordic Pavilion at the Venice Biennale this year. The pavilion responds to this year's theme of how we will live together, with the exhibition What We Share, a model for co-housing, which shows a framework for designing and building community based on participation and sharing. This exhibition was created in collaboration with residents of the award-winning co-housing project in Stavanger, Norway. Next one, please. Here you can see the other example. It's from Amsterdam, and as you can see, it exists already since 2007. The project provides 52 homes, and it was developed in response to a call from the city of Amsterdam for collective proposals. The project holds a long lease of the land it stands on, rather than owning the land. And it incorporates extensive community-facing facilities, including the shared garden, guest apartments, and a hobby space, which is mainly used as a workshop space. Also, the project incorporates communal greenhouse and a feeder space. And also, as you can see from these pictures, there is available publicly accessible waterfront. Next one, please. One more examples we would like to show is the older women co-housing with an idea dating back to 1998. A group of 6 older women, inspired by the Dutch example of senior co-housing, decided to create their own older women's co-housing community in London. And the process was so long and complicated that they could finally move in only in 2016. And now this development comprises 25 flats with shared communal facilities and gardens, managed on the co-housing principles. The next one.
Okay, we are looking for local expressions of collaborative housing. Yes, we had housing cooperatives from post-war period, but mainly it's related to form of ownership and maybe management. Still, the idea of collaboration was presented during Soviet period by development of youth housing complexes. In the 1980s, the idea of youth housing complexes in Riga was implemented. The largest was developed in the Moscow suburb between Frunzes, now Sadovnikova Street, Jēkabpils, Krāslavas, and Kiev Street. Subsequent residents were involved in both the design and construction process. The complex was also experimental from an architectural point of view. It provided multi-level apartments, common areas for communication, and other innovations. And there are several architects from Architectural Institute Pilsētu projects were involved, but main architect were Juris Poga for this big complex. So, and now we are going back to the definition of collaborative housing. If term says that collaboration among residents as well as between a community of residents and external stakeholders in housing provision is one of core aspects in all different models. So we would like to see how ready are people in Riga are for collaboration in housing topic and housing environment as well.
Yes, I will continue now. As the relevance of the topic remains up to date, there are also recent research results. And here you can see an example of bachelor thesis completed in 2019 on the topic of co-housing. Here the author studied opportunities for co-housing in Riga and also the readiness of inhabitants to accept it. And one of the tools he used were surveys, which showed that people, the next one, I guess. Yes, here you can see some survey results, and one of those answers showed that people in the age from 22 to 50 are more open to co-use of space and facilities. So, for example, people are ready to share bicycle parking facilities and workshop rooms, and also outdoor sports equipment. But, for example, respondents are less ready to share greenhouse space or the terrace or guest house and guest bedrooms. Surprisingly, here you can also see that not very large amount of respondents answered that they would like to share the courtyard space. However, later we will see examples where a lot of people are sharing courtyard and they should live with this reality. Still, as you see in general, all mentioned methods and options, especially some spaces like sauna or large space for common celebrations, are more likely to be accepted, used collectively if your neighbors are your close friends. And then next one, please. And here you can see the obstacles and the opportunities. And among the main obstacles for collective use of space, respondents mentioned possible rubbish left from others, also possibility of personal conflicts, and inability to follow the common rules. However, there are also some good points, as for example mentioned, as an opportunity to have better relations with neighbors and to have more trust in your neighbors. The next one, please. Yes, but one more example of collectively used space are courtyards in large housing estates. These areas raise many discussions, and certain problems arise when managing and maintaining these large green spaces, which are supposed to be used by the large amount of residents. As these spaces are often criticized because of unclear borders and undefined function, and also people usually don't know who is in charge of maintenance. So as more and more residents are using their right to a city, there is a question: are people ready to participate actively in co-maintenance and co-design of these spaces or not? So here you see just result from one question. This is an ongoing survey data, which is a part of a broader PhD research, which I make now. And it shows in which community life activities related to courtyard management, maintenance, and development people are ready to engage. So, for example, in general, people are ready to participate in co-design and co-creation of open space in all three estates. Also, respondents would agree to participate in events organized by the local community or collaborate with municipality to improve the quality of residential environment. We may say that people don't wish to share their own materials or to give some financial support for open space development and maintenance. The next one.
So, and we have some, yes, maybe preliminary findings. We think that existing public initiatives to improve the public space, improve some common spaces, improve social environment in Riga could serve as basis for the development of other projects as well. Maybe a housing issue as well. This is still, of course, under question. Why housing topic till now is not in focus of many public initiatives, but this very small research into practices in other cities could serve as basis to maybe prognose similar activities in Riga as well. And some findings from this practice in other cities, that community groups with high level of civic participation and organization are able to develop projects without waiting for support from state or local government. From our point of view, this is a very important message because what we could see in local, this social environment till now, dominant viewpoint is to ask state or local governments for solving all problems of life. And this last one is finding from this questionnaire that there are enough people in Latvia who are ready to live in a neighboring community, that this model of housing organization is coming to Latvia and Riga. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra and Alisa. And you have two questions. One is from Paulia and second from Tālis, Tisenkopfs. Could you answer them? You can find them in your chat.
Okay. One is who is financing co-housing and how. What we saw from this literature analysis, the financial models could be various, and quite often there are some subsidies from local government, but other these financial models ask for self-financing only. Alisa, could you
yes,
add?
I can also add something more particular. For example, this example from Amsterdam, which we show. There is a collective custom-built housing, which is a very well-known model in Netherlands. And shortly speaking, this model involves individual household securing their individual mortgages. So, and then this goes on different stages of construction of the project with a single agreement with the whole community. But for example, the one which showed the old women's co-housing in London, they got a lot of support from different trusts, and also the support from Hanover executive board, who actually were interested to test this senior co-housing idea, senior co-housing model. So they were interested to buy the land and to invest in development of these projects to test how it works. Thank you.
So, and we have another question. Thank you for this question as well. And it's about how cultural differences has been solved among these examples or in future. And the cultural diversity can be a vital aspect and in some cases serious issue for residents. So doing this smaller research, we found as well as many critical topics on this concept, and it's related to what we could say cohesion as well, because as this concept idea told that the driving force is common values of these participants, and maybe what does it mean, common values? Maybe in some cases, does it mean exclusion of some potential participants because of different maybe values or different, as here, maybe different culture aspects and other. So we would like to test this model, opportunities or possibilities here locally, but yes, there are many questions for research and for discussion. But still, now we could say that in very many, at least European cities, this model of collaborative housing seems as the emerging and very potential way how to solve housing crisis.
Yeah, I could add just a small thoughts about these cultural issues, not only the cultural issues, but also if we look in Riga's examples of co-maintenance and co-use of the open space, then also the conflicts between these different user groups remain crucial. And well, here's the question: who owns the space, and who is this person who benefits from those improvements of the courtyard space, and who remains those unsatisfied? So this is a big question, and we are still thinking about those solutions, possible solutions. Thank you.
So thank you for your presentation, and now I give a word to Kristaps.
Hi, hello everyone. Just let me share my screen. It becomes a continuous challenge to talk after Sandra, Treya, and since our thoughts and ideas rather often fall in the same spectrum, it's increasingly challenging to come up with new ideas. However, it helps that I'm currently representing, and I never thought that I will be the one presenting these boring municipal presentations, but then, well, that gives another perspective to add. So just to start off, my name is Kristaps Kaugurs, and I'm glad to be in front of this audience and to talk about possible housing futures in Riga and the challenges and probably some opportunities as well that might be awarded by this. And well, I'm planner by training, although misleadingly I come from architect's office, and I have some economical backgrounds as well, and I will try to make connections of those fields here as well in my presentation. Just thinking, let me digress for a moment, just thinking on the topic that I picked myself, I thought that like, whether it would have been better choice to pick wise instead of smart housing policy, because in terms of smart cities and smart houses, we often think about like sensitive to the latest trends and latest technologies, whereas wise is more sensible and subtle to experiences, and in general we always think about these the term smart housing and smart cities mainly refers to those technologies, and then we think about those big networks and sensors and who is in control of them, and whether everyone in society is able or knowledgeable or can access that and wield that power. So we always think of this onslaught of technocracy, and whether smartness or smart concept will not become a new layer of elitism. So just to conclude my digress, today I would like to talk about like what is a smart housing policy, probably, and the state of art thinking in Riga, or let's say current trends or current ideas that we share in Riga city, municipality, and as well as in ministries and other involved parties, and I would like to touch on the massive housing renovation problem that other presenters already mentioned this here already in this. So what is a smart housing policy? Of course, we need to start with defining our terms. So in US, understanding smart, and they love these abbreviatures. smart housing policy aims to stimulate the production of housing for low and moderate income residents. And they say it's safe, mixed income, accessible, reasonably priced, and transit oriented, explaining here that that means close to city wielded transportation, like public transport. When we come to EU understanding and EU take on this, then we more often think about the same things, but in a more social and socially aware aspect. We think on co-ownership, co-management, and co-design, about well-placed social mix in those houses, and how that housing market could be kept away from speculation, threats, and everything else. And we definitely are forefront of renovation and energy efficiency here in Europe. And I will touch on that later on. But in that aforementioned urban housing agenda, which is an EU initiative, and actually like it's like from 2018, it touches on the need for better legislation, better funding and financing, and better exchange of knowledge. And why I mention here this guidance on EU regulation and public support for housing and capacity for building application in states on affordable housing seemed like a radical idea at that time, at 2008, end of 2008, when the report was produced. But I will mention that later on in the presentation, how COVID-19 has sped up this innovation and transition of those ideas from radical group of housing socialists to funding prerequisites of EU. And hopefully we can follow, and Latvia and Riga and all of our towns can follow. So meanwhile, I was also thinking, like, well, is smart housing social housing? It's probably not always, but sometimes. Is social housing smart? Well, most likely yes. And I will touch upon that a bit later. Like, where do subsidies come in and why? Like, how come that it doesn't just happen on itself? And why do we lean towards social? So state-of-art thinking in Riga, or the problems that are facing. As many of presenters previously already mentioned, we have a high concentration of post-war housing. It's about 60% of people in Latvia live in post-war high-rises, and 60% of those live in Riga. And again, conveniently enough, 60% of Riga inhabitants live in those, it's approximate number, but anyways, in those housing types. And so about 6,000 buildings are the approximate number that we have to renovate, of course, because to keep up with new standards and energy efficiency requirements. Our progress so far is only 140. And then just to give that in context, most of those houses are owned by people. So that is another layer of challenges. And then we come to why social and why subsidies. So OECD back in 2019 came up with the report, I think it was finalized last year, when they talked about missing middle. And here it requires a little bit of explanation. So we have this lower end or the right side of a spectrum where the average income per month is located. And then on the x-axis, we have the percentage of people that correspond to that level of income. And what we see here is that on the left side, we have people who have accessibility to some kind of housing support and subsidy. And on the right side are those people who banks and commercial sector consider as a viable clients, and those who might be considered for loan. And then we have something between 40 and 60%. OECD changed their estimates to more moderate 40%, are people who are, as they called, missing the middle, or the people who are too rich to get a subsidy and too poor to get a loan. And this also indicates that between 40 and 60% of those people, and remember back, 60% of Riga inhabitants live in houses that they own and they need to renovate, are most likely those people who fit into this section, and they are stuck. So basically, they cannot afford to buy a new apartment, and they most likely are quite struggling to get a proper loan for making their situation better at this apartment. And that becomes a challenge, and I will touch on that later on, but that's a complex question. And of course, as always, we can say that answer to the ultimate question is 42, but then wise housing policy probably is better choice. And this is where we come to this idea of expanding our sense of affordable housing. So in the left side, this is what we currently think of affordable, or let's say social housing, as we say in Latvian, and it has a bad connotation. It's emergency shelter, it's transitional housing, and it's something that nobody wants to be associated with. Also, this is the only housing that most of, including Riga's municipality, currently thinks about. And then on the right, complete far right, we have rest of the housing, market rentals and market home ownerships. But however, as we saw in our previous slide, only that blue sector, those top 10%, are good residents of this open market. So we need to think on how do we deal with rest of the people who are our average income people. So we need to expand our understanding of affordable housing, of social housing that's not with this bad connotation, affordable rental housing, and probably also affordable house ownership, which comes when you can buy your house later on, when you live in it for a while. So these are our challenges. And then just to go to the other part of my presentation, where to start, of course, that's a good question always. And the answer probably is more complex than I can answer in this presentation, but the answer is probably everywhere. But we really need to pick our focuses. Of course, the challenge is we need to renovate houses, we need to regenerate Riga city center, which has a different challenge, and then of course we need to build new housing to comply with our new ideas or new concepts of modern living and comfortable living. Our partners from Ether and Certus that we did our research with last year for Riga Architects Conference suggested that we should densify the city and build new houses inside of a railroad circle. Interestingly enough, we were once again just a year ago preaching this radical idea of newly built affordable social housing, and just January this year, Ministry of Economics announced, and it's in reduced amount, but still a total innovation to Latvian market, affordable housing construction scheme that probably will be ready about at 2023 and consists of almost 43 million euros. It's of course not enough, and it's spent on a whole Latvia scale, but that's still a new start. And of course, this week a rental law was passed. But where to start? Probably, as I mentioned before, we have this huge sector of 60% of inhabitants that are not otherwise covered. And as well as our EU's president mentioned that most of those buildings that we live in currently in 2050 will be still in use, and we will be still using them. So our renovation is probably our biggest challenge. And I would say that it's both our biggest challenge and probably a potential for the biggest innovation. since I'm a big believer in behavioral economics and nudges for people to do things and to make decisions, so this is probably our way to go. Luckily, our EU funding, as I mentioned before, all comes with conditions, and those conditions increasingly come with a green label on them. Also, as I mentioned before, many of those housing policies that seemed really new and innovative a while ago, in 2 years have come into policies and come to Latvia with our nudges to our government. And we love our nudges. We like conditions, and we like that somebody else gives us goals. And I'm sure that Latvia politicians will figure out how to comply with them. And this is probably the biggest challenge and potential for innovation, a smart recyclable funding scheme. And just to illustrate it, it takes about 6 billion euros to renovate the housing field in Riga in about 30 to 50 years. And our left its current situation where every subsidy from state or city goes into making those commercial loans more accessible to people. So we're actually fighting the fact that people can't get the commercial loans. However, with a better funding scheme where we can substitute those commercial loans with something else, with this what we call a slow money, something that's a low percentage loan, we free up cities or states funds for motivation, nudges to comply with planning documents, and way how to motivate people to make better choices for their futures, not the cheapest choices, but the better choices. And here I'm coming quickly to the end of presentation. What are the opportunities awarded by this? Of course, it's high quality materials that we could use and develop locally. And this is our potential because we have a good collection of our own scientists that have developed materials and methods how to insulate or improve our homes. And we need to think about how to transfer that to application. And this is one big challenge that we need to solve very, very quickly. It's of course economy of scale and rotation funds in the system. So borrowing big is usually cheaper. Producing a lot of materials and techniques is always cheaper on application end, and also better on quality control. And we should set ambitious energy claims. I didn't touch on this in my presentation, but you are geographers. You are very aware of COP25 claims and other goals that we need to reach, like zero emissions at 2050 and everything else. Just insulating our homes will not do that. And then architectural and historical identity for Riga and neighborhoods is something that we can solve in the process. We can deal with public transport, public spaces, and safer, healthier, and universally more accessible places. We would do good if we learned from our sister city, Vienna, which is well known for social houses and their take on that, but also in our region, every other country is currently dealing with the same problems like Estonia and Lithuania. So in Riga, we're just at the beginning of this process, and we're getting ready to tackle these challenges. So in summary, it's complicated and will soon, very, very soon, become our ultimate question of life. Those houses have or come very quickly to the end of their useful life. But also our EU goals are pressing us and will quite soon also be punishing us. In the meanwhile, while massive housing renovation program is inevitable, it's also a good opportunity for us. But it takes brave and wise politicians, and we're really short of those. And I think, and this is a place where I should call for a scientific or public to push these new ideas and new shifts in thinking on how could we live better or different in the future. And that mind shift is really needed. And another idea, of course, is not an idea, but just a reminder that insulation probably lower costs for heat, but it doesn't really improve our living conditions. And as some people already previously mentioned, people are getting away from Riga once their income surpasses some point where they can afford that. So just to tackle this problem, we probably need to think about what they need, and they probably do not need a better insulated house, but a house with better services and better conditions, and maybe a room extra for working with a long distance, or some completely new ideas from communal conditions that we could include in our future houses. So that's it, and thank you everyone for listening to me. If there are any questions, I can take those.
Thank you very much, Kristaps, for your presentation. So we don't have a question for you, but we have some compliments, so you can read them in the chat.
Oh, and nice. That's always nice to have. Yes, thank you.
And now I will give the word to the most energetic speaker, maybe Jonas.
Okay, thanks for that compliment. First of all, I have to give my... One moment, please. No. I try to open my presentation, but I have some trouble. Okay. God, what is that? I have trouble with my firewall. Margarita, could you possibly, I just sent you the presentation, add the presentation?
Yes, just a second.
Meanwhile, I will probably start. Sandris, thanks a lot for the energetic comment. I'm not really sure whether I'm like that energetic person that I have been probably 10 years ago or longer. I don't know, when I have been participating first in this conference. Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Jonas Büchel. I'm having the honor to speak after a very close friend and another friend and very, very close colleague. And it is kind of a tradition that I'm always the last one. Nobody really understands why that is like this, but it is like that. I'm usually the last one. Maybe to trigger discussions, I have no idea, but generally that is what I'm like set at. So my presentation today is a little bit in a difficult situation. I usually don't have that problems, but today I have a very specific situation that I have to talk about a project which I have co-designed together with a close colleague. But apparently we have been kind of in a total delay with the project. This is due to myself having been very, very sick last year. And yeah, we simply couldn't work then for several months until early this year now. And otherwise, we have been also a little bit, how to say, been in problems with the pandemic situation. Since we are very much in a capacity building project here, we're dependent on allocating speakers and working with workshop speakers, and that has been apparently quite difficult in the last weeks. But on the other hand, we now are getting there finally, like actually very much also today. My title is Realities and Myth in International Housing Policies in Comparison with Local Situations and Perceptions in Latvia. Now, this title is really crazy. And maybe I should mention that the nice guy who had the honor to speak before me has triggered me a little bit, and we triggered each other to like have, how to say, funny names of our presentations. So therefore, don't take that presentation name too serious. And it's definitely also not at all a scientific presentation, as Christophs has been doing right now, quite a scientific, backed up presentation to my mind, very excellent overview about the situation that we are. Now, still last reference to him, he was talking right now about the transfer to the application. So I think this project has possibly the potential to exactly fulfill this kind of application. But that is something that is in a not too far, but still distant future. Margareta, could I ask you for the second slide? So generally, the whole project is a cooperation project of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in the Baltic states. Specifically, the current head and director of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung here, Per Krumrei, and the Urban Institute. Next slide, please. So just to give you, I will be really very short about this whole presentation, I can say, because it's not much to report in the moment about, but just to give you an impression, this is a picture, a screenshot that I took yesterday. So I'm regular reading LSM, Latvian and Latvian English version. For those who are not Latvians, LSM is the state broadcaster, state television and radio broadcaster. And you see here a selection. This is just yesterday's overview of articles regarding our issue. I mean, if you see that, then you see how much also media is injecting the theme, how much also really and seriously inhabitants are injecting the theme. I'm thinking very much about the very early today's morning, very close, really colleague and fantastic man, Frank Eckardt, our colleague from Weimar, who was talking about the participatory concepts in Weimar, and how Yekaterina was then asking also in the chat about the participation. And when I'm looking on this, I think that if we would go out there and we would really offer some, how to say, very interesting tools, like for example, that what Tālis is doing in the Council or others, then we would probably get quite an extraordinary big feedback nowadays here in Latvia. Possibly not in Germany. I agree to Frank, it's quite difficult there, but here I think the attention is really high in the moment on these issues. Next slide, please. So I would like to call the whole thing the Vienna, and I usually refer more to Copenhagen, complex. In this respect, I'm a little bit coming back to Christophs also, who was, but that wasn't planned really, who was referring very shortly about the housing market and the real estate market and the steered real estate market in Vienna. Now, Vienna is something that is comparable to the usual Copenhagen complex, but specifically regarding the housing and real estate issues. Vienna is described as a kind of wonder, as like some kind of, I don't know, the magic in the box or something, and that you open, and once you have opened it, everything will be fine and everything is wonderful. Indeed, the projects in Vienna and this city council work in Vienna and the long-term projects in Vienna, actually, we have to be honest, I mean, Karl Marx real estate projects, they're really mentioned, I mean, named like this. so-called Karl Marx Höfe in Vienna. They are like more than 100 years old now. They just had an anniversary. So, I mean, it is a very long and very old tradition, but it for sure builds similar, like generally with urban development, as in Copenhagen, or we can also take Vancouver, or we can take Amsterdam. These are the usual suspects. We have to consider that these cities, and specifically Vienna and Copenhagen, are very rich cities. I mean, not talking about all of the inhabitants, for sure we will find also non-rich inhabitants in Vienna and in Copenhagen. Nevertheless, the cities as such and the economic structure is quite massive and absolutely, definitely uncomparable with Riga or many other cities. So for us, there is a little bit this idea of the wonders of Vienna versus the small and average cities' realities. And with this, I'm not only referring to the situation here in the Baltic states, specifically Latvia, but this can be taken also to economically more well-developed situations like in Finland or in Sweden or in Germany. So there are certainly different realities. I just have to only talk about my own home city in Germany, which has similar problems and definitely hasn't like managed them as beautiful as Vienna. Just because it's in Germany, it doesn't mean that it's in a better situation. So we have to fight a little bit this complex, and we have to my mind, for that case, or in this situation, we have to find opportunities which are based on different, settings. So we have to look probably out there to comparable partners who can offer tools and who can offer experiences, partly brand new ones, that are, say, a little bit more connected to our own social and economical situation in Latvia and in Riga. But not only Riga, since our project is not focusing mainly on Riga. Next slide, please. The whole project started with a focus group meeting in 2020, in October. The meeting was generally, most of all, in order to bring some people together who are really working in this field and who have some certain kind of knowledge in the field, or some heavy knowledge, like the one who just talked. He was also part of that meeting, Kristaps Kaugos, representing various institutions, like, for example, scientifically, Latvian University was there, not only by my representatives, by Gunter Luxtinia, our and RTU wasn't really there. In a way, we invited Sandra, who was speaking before Kristaps, but unfortunately she was sick, she couldn't come. Anyhow, we are in contact with the RTU, and as soon as we get forward with this project, also they will be part of it. And then we have had several representatives from the development department in Riga and from the welfare department in Riga, as well as with Kristaps also with the architectural office of Riga. And we had community representatives / politicians at place. So important in this, next slide, please. Important in this project is that we want to find examples out there in the wilderness, called Europe, that are more comparable to us, as I said, in terms of social and economical and demographical scales, because this is, and also for sure in terms of transition situations, because this is very important. Okay, next slide, please. So we have generally focused on 3 different examples for the moment, with which we want to start this project. And the first one will be, I can say that today, it's not even yet here in the presentation, but you can mark the date. We will have on May 6 our first presentation in this respect. And that will be done by Rachel as a fantastic researcher, as well as she is really working for the ministry in Malta and has developed this Malta Housing Foundation project, which is, I can't tell very much about it because I'm myself not really an expert and it's brand new. But this project is aiming to try to find different economical tools for housing projects, not only for the tenant, and we talked, or Kristaps talked a lot about the need of also social housing, affordable housing as a very important point. So guaranteeing not only affordable housing for the so-called end user, but also trying to elaborate tools also for a very, very small, tiny, small Maltese economic market and very overheated real estate market. I think there is no other market in Europe currently that is that overheated as Malta's real estate market. And especially there, the government tried to, as to say, give a counteraction to the non-steered market that was making the situation for inhabitants near to impossible. So this project has been like finished last year and is just 1 year active. And Rachel on 6th of May will report about it, how they designed it, as well as how do they see now after 1 year in action already like some first, how to say, I think we can't forget about an evaluation, but the first monitorings, like what has happened and at which place are they? That would be the first example. Next slide, please. We have a second one, which is, I agree, certainly much more built on the idea of a very rich city, probably one of the most richest cities in Germany, if not the richest city in Germany, Munich. But there is one specific thing coming along with Munich. Munich offers examples that are very much going hand in hand with the idea of also already over 100 years old idea, and in some countries very successfully implemented, building cooperatives. I mean, all of it started as well in Austria, in Germany, in northern Italy, those building cooperatives around the 1890s, but I mean, they have been ongoing until today. They never died. While here in the Baltic states, we, not actually in all three countries, but specifically in Latvia, we still have quite a huge problem due to the transitional process after the communistic era. We have quite a big problem with the idea of a cooperative. Still, the cooperative is something that has probably to be seriously been reinvented. And we believe it is good to see how Munich's government is also top-down steering the process of these cooperative models, building cooperatives. Okay, that's about Munich, the second example. And the last one for the moment, the last one would be looking on a little bit older project that is already ongoing since the 90s, the early, in Polish case, we can't talk about independence, but the early transition process after freedom, socialistic government stopped with Jaruzelski 88 in Poland, 88, 89. And since the very early 90s, Poland and specifically Gdansk has been very much focusing on an idea of a different housing market, specifically targeting and focusing on the also their huge, large-scale housing estates of the so-called Soviet era, though Poland wasn't Soviet, but this is exactly the style of these block settlements. And they have had quite some achievements already in the 90s and still have that today, and that's an ongoing process. We have a contact to the then minister who has been actually in charge of doing all of this. And we hope to invite her and to give a feedback on that, what she has been doing back in the 90s and what was the intention and what is happening today. So nevertheless, next to that, we also want to, with a very close contact in Gdansk, Monika Szabor, she's also known for some colleagues here in Riga. We want to look specifically one more time also what is so specific on the social development in Gdansk and how that has been achieved also by a different policy of housing. So how can actually housing in general and we just have to follow that what Christoph has said before, how can housing in general also promote really a social development of an entire city or even region, specifically also looking on the idea of that, what we have seen in earlier stages in Gdansk, how, for example, the Wharft and the situation there with La Valence and all the development, the political development, has been very much also giving an alternative, especially in the last 10 years, to the current Warsaw politics. Gdansk sees itself there a little bit also in a political contra situation. So looking on that is also an interesting point, how a city that is very comparable with Riga tries to elaborate something that is maybe going against the stream also. And that is what we are looking on in Gdansk. These are our first three examples. Next slide, please. So generally, the project understands itself as an administrative, NGO, and political support and capacity building project. So I'm just reading them, especially in the ongoing Latvian administrative territorial reform, aiming to give new incentives to rethink the classically used models of housing. Further on, the project wishes to promote ideas of alternative economic models, such as building cooperatives in times of an extremely insecure and overheated real estate market, which is nothing else than that what actually also before, already early morning, Frank, Eckardt, later on Sandra, and definitely Tālis also, and now just before me, Christoph, have been talking about. And the main point in this is that we actually also would like, and this is very important here, not so much go on the scientific level. This is number one. We very much want to support local civic society, local political decision makers, administrative structures, and experts who are really seeking for new solutions and who really want a change. And we want to stimulate them and to support them in this next months of, especially we see this reform, the administrative reform and territorial reform, which is not of a discussion right now here, although we would probably love to do that. And especially with the new setup of our new municipal constructions in Latvia, we will also have new decision makers and we will have new situations. And in these new situations, we have to find, once again, we have to find new models, but we also have a chance of a change in this moment. So we want to use this. So we are not so much based on the scientific situation, but we are much more, this is a backup for us, and we need people like working on it, like Sandra and Christoph and so on, but we want very much to go inside the municipalities, and we definitely are not so much aiming on Riga. Riga is well represented. We are aiming on also rural towns and the situation there, and want to build up a network. That is actually the idea behind all of this, which tries to support itself. And I mean, these are just the first three examples coming in from outside, but also tries to support itself by our own examples, built in Latvia or Estonia as Lithuania. This is the idea. This is how we are starting. The start is just, first of all, building up a small network, trying to find a little bit some expertise outside, documenting it, bringing it in. This will be happening during 2021, and the first session will be May 6th, as already said. So next slide, please. That's it. But I wanted, since I have the honor to be again, and as always, to be the last one, not the last one of the day, but before we have the lunch break, we need to look a little bit on this lyrics from Jim Morrison. And I find it very interesting. I didn't really ever look, I mean, I know this song by head, but I never looked really on this line. This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. But then the end of our elaborate plans. That is something that I have never seen so clearly before, and maybe it's the end of our elaborate plans. I hope you have a nice discussion. Thank you for listening. Thanks for all the speakers before me. And back to the wonderful Sandris.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you. And by the way, you have 2 questions, and you can find them in the comment section, right?
Okay, first of all,
First from Milana, you see, and Ekaterina.
I agree we have to rethink cooperation in Latvia, but perhaps it is not just the concept, but the expectations that is expected of the state. Oh yeah, I very much agree. On that level, Gianna, you're totally right. Joe, we need to really like work very much on these expectations. But I think what we have, and this is something that we really have to move, but this is not the only field, as you know, Joe, and everybody else knows very well around. We don't have to look only on the idea of top down. So the funny and interesting point that I see for 20 years living in Latvia is that that I have a strange feeling of there is this idea of manna comes from heaven, which is kind of this Spanish idea, the food falls down from heaven, manna from heaven, which is still actually very much based on the old Soviet and like socialistic idea that that we have like everything solved top down. And at the same time, we ourselves actually lack to really take initiative. And we're just like saying, yeah, but can somebody please manage that? So yes, we have to talk about the expectations. Absolutely. And maybe this project supports, but as I said, I think we look most of all forward to really try to support this, what I noted it down, transfer to application, which Christoph says earlier, because I think it's really important that this fantastic project that Christoph and others are doing, Katarina and others are doing in the city council also, that it's in Riga city council, that we find ways to really bring that in praxis. And I think especially it's very helpful in that moment that we are doing this project together with a political foundation from Germany, where we have a support to find other, whatever, I don't know, like many that could help us in developing this kind of application. So I rather prefer application than expectations. So then, Yekaterina, Jonas, thank you. Will we be able to read more about your project and case studies in the later phase of the project? Is there any public report planned? Yes, first of all, for sure, we will have public workshops, and these workshops will be seriously public. That means on 6th of May, whoever wants to join is very welcome to join. And then in the end of the year, we will put all of this together and also for sure translate it to Latvian. That's very important. And then there's still a private comment here. Yay, from Jessica, because I have to mention that I actually work together with Jessica on all of this. Nobody else can see that, only I can see that. Yes, Jessica, very much thank you. You have been cooperating in the project and you will be further on as well. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. So now we can start, I think, a discussion part, right? And all discussion, what was like all this part or this section of the conference is devoted to the future of housing. So I would like to ask a question to any presenter and maybe anybody who is participating here as well. And the question is, how COVID-19, right? How it will shape our understanding of housing, how it will shape our perspective of housing. Do you see like something already, some changes, or maybe you have some kind of some predictions? So, and let me start this question with Frank.
Yeah, thank you very much for having the privilege to answer first. And also the difficulty to give the first answer. I think that there are two things to be that comes to my mind. First is that we need to have a different understanding of housing, and I mean housing. Normally we talk about really just the apartment, but what we see now with the Corona crisis is when you are in lockdown, your nearest environment becomes so crucial, and we I think. It's of course in architecture that we talk about the environment of housing as well. That's true, but now we have a different. I think we are much more enforced to think about how do, for example, children who are in lockdown can play close to the house? What can we do? For example, if you cannot go anywhere because the shops are closed, but you still want to go out, what can you do then? And many people will say, we'll not do anything just for a simple reason that there is no toilet. I mean, in the last 20, 30 years in all European cities, what we did to spare money is to close the toilets because you could go to a restaurant to go to a toilet. But now you go to a public space, there is nothing. After half an hour, then you want to go to the toilet or something else, to do something. So that's not there. So we have to really rethink about our public spaces, our green spaces, and health. Health should become the main paradigm for us to think about, and no longer cars, parking places, shopping centers, which we see now in this crisis are not that relevant as many other things which we have been sparing. So that's one point. So thinking about housing in the context of the whole city, especially the context of space, green space, public space, open space. The second is we see, I think that was very good also in the contribution of Zeiger, we see huge differences in the housing. And I can only talk about the German case. We have as much housing space as ever in the German history. If you take it per capita, then we will have so much space that if we expanded in the last 30 years so much in the average, that if we would have stayed with the average housing space of the 1970s, then we would have an extra housing space for 20 million more people. But because everybody gets more on the average, we still say we have not enough. And the bitter truth is, it is true for a lot of people who still do not have enough space. So in Germany, we have 6 million people living in 2 small places. Meaning, for example, that children do not have an own space to sleep. So they sleep with their parents. They have no space when they now do homeschooling, they do it on the kitchen table. They have no space for rest or whatsoever. So we see on the one hand side, we have the largest amount of housing space ever, but at the same time, we did not solve the problem for a huge minority of people to get adequate space. So, and now this is of course something we knew until now. Yeah, it's a problem, of course, not so nice. But now with a lockdown, this becomes a real, a very severe social problem. And I think that we have to have, so my idea is we have to have 2 consequences of the Corona crisis regarding housing. One is take care of the space around the house. Second is we need to distribute the space more equally among us. Okay, sorry being so long, sorry.
Jonas, you're rising.
Yeah, I just wanted shortly to mention, I mean, okay, it's not very fair to have here like 2 Germans sitting next to each other. That's of approximately the same age and background and so on. Anyhow, what I find though so significant is, Frank and all others, I mean, we need to understand, especially very short feedback only, we need to understand, especially in Germany, we have had in early 90s, and 80s actually already, when still separated Germany, but then in early 90s with various models, but most of all in Berlin, we have had really attempts to change this kind of housing policy. Like, for example, the living environment development processes, which were going also hand in hand with community development processes in approximately 120,000 flats, apartments in Berlin, in Eastern Berlin. So considering that this has happened back then, and that we gained a lot of knowledge. Certainly not everything was running well and good, but we gained a hell of a knowledge, or a heaven of knowledge and expertise. And we just left it there somewhere in the mid-end 90s, and that's it. And then we got like next chapter and we forgot about all of this. And Frank just again stated it, and Christoph stated earlier, like this conflict that I found so interesting that he demonstrated also, the conflict of the idea of densifying, or maybe not densifying, but doing something on that what we have, and first of all developing all of that substance, this masses that we have. With this also to exactly what Frank now said, not only that we have to do the energetic passport, the European energetic passport. Yes, that's very important, and climate change and so on, but the chances that we have with exactly what you said, Frank, changing the living environment and also having community development go hand in hand with housing projects in existing housing situations, not new build. That is that tool that we simply don't use enough in Germany, not anymore, and in Latvia, not at all yet. So this is where we have to my mind, to target, and where we have to see our chances. I think Tālis project is very much trying to do that in a way, but these are these tiny small attempts, and I find it very perfect how Tālis, how you said also that ESPON is specifically supporting the small project also. I totally agree on that. Nevertheless, we need to find also general policy tools, top-down, state-down. They are necessary.
Thank you very much. And I know that Christoph wants to say, but Christoph, maybe you can say something about as well how you see how COVID-19 will reshape perspective of housing.
Okay, I thought that was the original question.
Yes, right. Yes. This is what
right.
I want to.
Yeah, well, I think that COVID-19 remembers and reinstates our idea that housing is our fortress, and housing, or my house, is my place to hide away from this terrible disease. And I'm not sure if and I'm clearly stating this here, I'm doing that for sake of argument, and might be interested in good answers. I think maybe so we're sitting in a situation where COVID-19 forces us to sit at home, and we're dropping into the idea that we need more space for working from home forever and ever, more space to educate our children, and we lack the funds to afford that. Otherwise, we would have that already. And maybe, just maybe, housing could be something. Well, not all problems should be solved by housing. That would be my thesis here. And maybe not everything needs to happen in house. It's something similar that we could just state this argument in the same way that we could argue that everybody needs to buy a car now, because that's a good solution. That's the only safe place how to move around in the COVID crisis. And then the first time when we go to public transport and it's late, we say, see, that's a proof that we all need our private cars. But maybe, and just maybe, and many of people here talked about that, our attitudes or our life standards and life expectations could be different, and maybe we work in different environments. Maybe there are communal spaces where you can still separate yourself from others and have privacy, but just maybe you don't need everything that in your private house. So that would be my idea here. It's much like service, like cars and scooters are now. So maybe house can become something like that as well.
So you're speaking about some kind of micro living, or you're speaking about co-working spaces?
Something like that, and maybe housing mobility is, of course, a large part of this. Then if I want to move to Liepāja, for example, to work there, and I'm free to do that decision without ties that my private property tie down here in Riga, but also not all of the problems in our current COVID crisis, maybe they all not should be solved by purchasing larger apartments, because somebody will have to pay for them, live in them, also after we end this COVID crisis.
So I saw the figure by Sandra, maybe Sandra?
Yes, yes, thank you, Kristaps. Actually, I have a similar feeling about this COVID impact maybe on future, we could say. Actually, so this pandemic situation changed so many previously usual things. I have a series of lectures for this semester in housing and urban planning, and actually I should change all lectures which are developed for years, because the main general things now is changed. If an example, if in times before COVID there were clear results from multiple international research that people spend less and less time in their homes. They spend time in public spaces, which we need to be developed. They spend on working, they spent on other facilities, other places, and it was clear, clear message that actually home going to be less and less important part of their lives. Because of mobility, because of many other things. So now it's totally changed. So I agree with Kristaps. I would like not to come with quick prognosis and very dramatic changes in housing paradigm. Yes, maybe we'll see in next conference next year what we are going to continue on this topic on pandemic impact on housing development.
Maybe Tālis, now maybe you can provide some sociological perspective on that.
Thank you. I fully agree with what has been said. Do you see my hand? You do. So what COVID is making with our, I should say, homes, not housing, but homes, compressing, congesting, and expanding. And what that should mean. So we see the enormous congestion, in-home congestion of activities, schooling, remote work, caring of children, all happening in our private space, in our private homes. So many activities, even conferences held from my living room. So the other process is home expansion. In fact, I never hold a conference or had so many visitors in my living room than today's conference. So you are watching me from my living room. My living room becomes really globalized place. So also by means of digitalization. So it's strange. I noticed that from former summer when I lived in my country home and hold a meeting of one project in the morning, meeting in another project in the afternoon, which I normally would have traveled abroad. So, but what comes when we pulsate, compress and expand? So the effect is on our psyche. This creates enormous stress to manage this COVID, in-home COVID, and not least the mental health issues, which are more and more obvious. And also, so these would be my comments, what happens to our homes and to our lives, in fact.
Jonas?
Just a very short add on. I liked very much what you mentioned, Kristaps, Tālis, and Sandra, and specifically when I'm looking on Sandra's comment, maybe next year we will look on some results, or not results, but first attempts, or I would very much suggest that we probably next year can look on existing ideas and projects in Riga or in Latvia where different communal situations are tested. And I think, Sandris, you and I very much know exactly what I'm talking about when we are talking about RTU's old faculty, transport faculty, where we, Free Riga, are trying actually to develop a new living and working. Yes, first of all, a little bit on the cultural aspect, but nevertheless, there is an attempt that you can actually reuse these old buildings. I mean, most people, Frank, unfortunately not, but most Latvians or Rigan people know what is the old transport faculty and in Čirko counts. And it's a 15,000 square meters Soviet-built facility that can be used in a different way. And we are right now doing it. Sandris, in fact, you are doing it. I'm a little bit out because of my former illness, but we'll be back inside and we will test this. And next year we can maybe report about it and can say, okay, the first year we have done this and this community experiences that would help us, assist us on the way further on. And I think we need many more of these small, tiny alternative projects. Tiny or not so tiny. For us, it feels not tiny, 15,000 square meters, but okay. I mean, in respect of the entire issue, it is tiny. But when we have like these projects all around the country, then we can really support a new development, what Kristaps was talking about.
Alisa, maybe you can share your perspective how pandemic changed.
In general, I agree to all previous comments, but more to Frank's comment on the fact that we should look more on the closest environment next to our homes and to public space. And especially now during COVID, for example, we didn't have that strict lockdown in Latvia, but if we think about Lithuania, for example, when people couldn't travel to the other municipalities, then this space next to our homes becomes crucial, and we look more critically on the quality of this environment. And those who didn't use that space before the pandemic, now they are trying to use and see that it doesn't work that well, and there are not that much opportunities and functions provided. So this question arises and more people become interested in solving it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alison. Maybe somebody from listeners have something to say about it. If yes, I think this could be the time when you can switch on your microphones. If not, then my next question, right, would be like that. What shapes the future of housing, right? So we discussed only one part. It's maybe like crisis. Then it could be alternative, like policy, different lifestyles, right? So there are new, at least before COVID-19, there was lifestyles that people are traveling around big cities. They are avoiding ownership. They need to very like not anything which is not embedding them into the place, or it could be like technologies, right? So it's folding very easily, compact houses. What is the biggest, or maybe access to finance, right? Banking system, and etc. What is the biggest factor? What shapes the future of housing to your mind? Tālis?
Yes, if no one raised hand. I think very, very shortly, you know, the things are shaped by market, by people themselves, of course, by market and by policies. And for Latvia and in Riga, and mostly maybe even in Riga, there is huge disbalance between market drivers and public policy drivers in housing. We see rude market domination, you know, buying up properties, selling, speculating, etc. We need much more housing policies, and some good examples, like, for example, I mentioned for myself the idea of syndicate of rental houses. This is a nice prototype, or co-housing, etc., municipal programs for housing. And we see that in outside Riga, in Valmiera, Cēsis, municipalities are much more active in providing municipal housing, etc. So much more emphasis on public policies.
Christoph, maybe you can something to say about.
Yeah, well, it was previous. I think Franco as well had a comment, just to mention it. But well, I was wondering on what some people, I think Jonas and others as well, mentioned, that we have this idea that somebody else should come over and fix stuff for me. I mean, this is broken. Somebody should fix it. Like somebody should do something very soon. Maybe if COVID crisis persists a little and we're prohibited to escape to, I don't know, Greece or Italy for a while, we can start to look around us and maybe our feelings change and we can start more think about like, hey, nobody's fixing this. Maybe we can come together and do that. And maybe that's okay. And where I'm leading with this, just to tie it together with this idea, somebody else asked this question to Sandra, I think, who's financing those new ideas of housing? And I think what is much needed is this rebirth of cooperatives. So people coming together with similar ideas, similar lifestyles, and creating housing for themselves, an environment for themselves. And examples from Vienna, for example, stimulate this process by co-funding it. In some cases, up to 80%, not by just making a present of 80% of the price, but giving like 20% subsidy and 60% of grants in making this easy access to the long-term loan. And then people are stimulated to create different types of housing, different types of living, and explore what we like. And then there comes diversity, because some people would like to join together and make a party house. We just sing to Bob Dylan's songs all day long, and we have actually a disco in our first floor. And some people are more focused on childcare or some other ideas. Or maybe we want a detached housing, you know, a small community with gates and gardens. And there's a possibility for wider spectrum of diversity, creativeness from people for themselves. And then also, I think the market can grow from there, because I might go to your place and say, hey, that's nice. You have a very interesting garden in back of your picture. Can I also buy this type of lifestyle?
Yeah, I was proposed to comment that because I have commented in chat, but I think maybe it's not the solution, you know, that what I'm proposing, but it's another thing to discuss. I think that previously many solutions were based on the most cost-effective solution that didn't include Plan B, that didn't, you know, allow any flexibility. And now in the crisis, we finally facing situation that we maybe need some flexibility, that our solutions need some Plan B and backup, and like that maybe could be something to consider.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina and Sandra.
Frank has a question for a long time, by the way.
I just want to, sorry, Sandra, please.
Yes, thank you. So if we are thinking about coming challenges, I guess that affordability is going to be one of growing importance for all of us. And it was this tendency was clearly seen before crisis, and of course this COVID crisis are going to make this tendency more and more impressive. And another, it's interesting, but quality, and it's relates to previous, I think, Ekaterina's remark, quality is going to be more and more important factor for all classes of housekeepers, all residents. It's interesting, it's not correlate with maybe with income. It's correlate with something like social housing standard, yeah, which is not fixed, but which manifest these needs and wishes of population of people. And this ask for quality is growing actually very, very fast. Even first, if we are looking to this housing career concept, even this young people who have very little money and who are not clear in their future visions, they have very clear and quite high prepositions for quality of housing. Okay, it's maybe just a theoretical topic, but it's very much related to our dominant housing stock in many Latvian cities. I mean, this post-war large housing buildings. And we clearly seen in different these questionnaires which organized by municipality or universities, and so we could see that this this percentage who are satisfied with such housing stock and with such quality, this percentage of inhabitants are decreasing, not very rapid, but still very, very stable. So I think that this question of quality will be on our table for next decades a lot.
Thank you. Frank, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to, of course, support the things that have been said before, especially what Tālis said about the market and the policies that we need. I think there's also a question about whether the market can still fulfill the needs of the people. And what we see is that a lot of people, especially now the Corona crisis, are experiencing that this is not the case. Let us take, for example, the senior citizens, especially. Now, being isolated and locked down for so long from family and friends in an empty house and apartment is an experience that is traumatizing a lot. We know that from psychologists and psychiatrists, they clearly say this is a traumatizing experience. And the only thing that really could help, and a lot of people sense that this, is that you have some contact in your close nearness. So somebody who is in your house. Now, what we see is that a lot of people buy their house, the middle class, they buy a house or build a house, and then for the family, and then the family grows up, and then we have the empty nesters. They stay in the house. But what we also know is that this is a lifetime project. So they start with building and buying this house, and then they pay the mortgage until they retire, or even longer. So when the children are out, they still have to live in the house, although it's much bigger than they need then. So having this one family apartment means something for a life period of 15, 20 years. But if you take the whole time scale, then it is 30, 40, 50 years that you stay in the house, and you have no chance to alternate it because you still have to pay for it. So you have no financial resources to say, okay, I'll take another apartment which is smaller and maybe closer to the city center where you have more medical support and where things are easier than your house at the outskirts. So I'm just telling this because this is a situation we are facing in Germany in a lot of regions very strongly. And it's because of Germany has a very dramatic demographic development with the people getting older and older and older. And they can't make any choice anymore because they're catched up in the situation. I have a large house and I still pay for that, but I need something else. I need a small house. I need to live with somebody close to me, and there is nobody. And now this feeling that they are imprisoned by their own house is something that is very strong. So so what to do? And we have some initiatives in Germany, and I wanted to just tell two examples. One is what we call a change management. So if you go out of your big house and you go to a smaller one, the family that lives in the smaller one moves into your larger one, and financially you can manage it so that you don't need extra resources. So this is the thing for many persons is a good solution. You don't move out if you get more financial problems. So some cities in Germany have started to do that. I think that's a very smart idea. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to change policies. You don't need to change. You don't need to build anything. You just have to bring people together who normally do not have contact with each other. Normally, the senior people and the new arising families do not know each other, but you can match their interests. And if you enable communication, then you can create win-win situations. So that's something that, for example, city of Wiesbaden is doing very successfully on a small scale as a kind of pilot project, but I guess it could work in many cities and in a larger scale. The second is a program I want to mention it's also with no money at all, with no policy change at all, that you can do is what is called housing for help. A lot of there are projects where especially students who cannot afford in many cities where the pressure on the housing market is so strong, they cannot afford a room or something like that. And we have especially elderly women because they live longer than men, being single and alone, and they need help. And help is something that that is very expensive and very difficult. You need to have to trust people, etc. So you could, if you have a large apartment, after your children are gone and your husband died, you could give easily one room to a student and say, you live here for free, but please do the shopping, do the cleaning. And it works. And it is a good program, again, on small scale. And again, I think you can manage a lot of win-win situations. So what I want to say, my conclusion is, yes, we can do a lot before the big wheel has changed. I'm arguing for policy changes since decades. They are not coming. And I'm arguing for different housing architecture, and it's not coming. So, but I believe in you can bring people together and then you can create win-win situations. So that's just what I wanted to bring in. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Maybe ending our conversation, everybody of speakers can say something what they want to say to others, like end note, and we can start maybe with Christoph. Okay, Jonas, at least we hear you, right?
Christoph, your mic was off. I think you said something and your mic was off. Okay, I should start. I have to say I'm very, last words today morning, I'm very impressed about our morning session today. I mean, I have been attending 10 or more of these annual, I always call them, or we call them like internally, the planners meeting. And it is something very unusual to have, especially in these times, in these Corona times, to have such a, to my mind, really like splendid and delightful feedback on these issues and so much insights. And especially when I'm looking on Tālis and his presentation about the Council work that he's doing there together with his project, and looking on my own and our project back in 2002 when I started there together with the colleagues on the Council attīstības projects, and looking what has happened in between then, and we did there the actually first real social planning attempts in Latvia, then I'm really happy. I'm super happy to see this. So I have sunny here at the coastline. It's very sunny. I have sunny feelings. Thanks, Sandris, for moderating us so nicely.
Yes. Tālis, your end words or end note?
Yeah, thank you indeed for organization and for inviting. I learned many good new things and good things. I learned something. This is very, very good, and thank you to all the panel and your papers, and to listeners as well, and have a nice weekend.
Christoph?
No, that's my earphone was discharged, so I couldn't say anything. Sorry. No, but yeah, agreeing to everybody else, it's amazing panel. Actually, I wanted to make a connection with the event that we were participating together with Sandra like 2 days ago in Liepāja. They have a huge area in front of a seaside that they are trying to decide what to build there, like what types of buildings to build there. And they don't even question that they should build houses there or do something else with that place. So in that part, I would just try to tie it back together to what I was mentioning. Maybe a lot more should come from us, like the ideas of how to live in the future. And maybe not people from top down should come up with ideas for the future housing settings and how post-COVID-19 life will be going on. But maybe we should come up with rather ideas how to enable those people who obviously most of them don't have funds to come up with this luxury. But maybe with some concepts, we can allow that creativity to come out. And maybe that will produce better answers to the questions that we are trying to solve from our one expert perspectives currently. So I strongly believe that might be a good way how to go about this. And thanks, everyone.
And maybe, Sandra, you can say something.
Thank you. I would like at first to say thank you very much to University and Gunther and Margarita for organizing this event. And I have a similar feeling as Jonas mentioned, actually, and which is well known for every researcher, and not. Yes, it's not only for researcher, actually it's a foundation for collaboration in housing as well. It's so nice to be between like-minded people. It's actually great. I would like to say thank you very much for all. And despite we are like-minded people, I catch, I think, in every presentation, some topic or some question for me, which is important for me, maybe for next thinking and for next ideas for a project or for some research. Thank you very much and have a nice weekend.
Alise?
Yes, I would also like to thank all the presenters today, and it was really inspiring to hear all this presentation in the morning. And I think now, as we raised this question of pandemics and COVID, I think it becomes clear that we need to trust more in our neighbors and to have more opportunities to collaborate and to assist and to share. Not only speaking about senior peoples, but also just speaking about every one of us. So thanks a lot about your inspiring ideas.
Thank you. Frank, maybe your end sentences or...
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. It's really very interesting conference here, and I wish I would be in Riga and go with Tālis to the marketplace, and it's really exciting to hear about this project and also about the other insights that are given to me about what you do. So thank you for having me. It's very nice being with you. Thank you.
So now we have a 1 hour break, and conference resumes sharply at 2 o'clock. So Gunta wanted something to say. You need to switch mic, I think.
Yes, I did it. At first, this was the idea of Peter to speak this year about the housing and the future, and you and we tried together to do. And I am keeping to the word, I think, Jonas, or we are coming back after 1 year, and I really hope maybe that we can meet in the university. So really thanks, and you are really a fantastic team, that you all together. And Peter.
Peter, tu laikam kaut ko gribi pateikt.
Thank you. I'm very thankful to all our contributors, and it was inspiring and very beautiful morning session. And I still am thinking about the question. Probably it's for next year to continue. Can we jump over this current situation coming from COVID and etc., and think about the key main factors which is expected for the future, for next decades, in context of thinking about housing policy and many changes which is coming up by technological development, revolution, like it's a change of lifestyle, change of social structures now, communication tools and understanding in sense of civic society, many things. Maybe we are too much in this COVID home and housing thinking, but it's understandable and good, and it's input which is came today. It's really beautiful. Thank you to all of us.
Okay. Okay, and now then we can, I can invite to come back at 2 o'clock, now having lunch, and 2 o'clock we will start sharp the next session.